The wind howled through the mountain pass, sharp and merciless, cutting through the night like a blade. Snowflakes spun wildly in the air, thick as smoke, blinding anyone who dared to step beyond a few feet. The world was frozen, still, cold, and unforgiving. Ethan's horse stumbled, exhausted, and he knew they couldn't go much farther. The storm had come out of nowhere, swallowing the sun and turning the sky into a furious white. He tugged his coat tighter and looked around desperately. Then, through the curtain of snow, he spotted something, a faint outline of a wooden cabin, barely standing against the storm's fury. He guided his horse toward it, heart pounding with relief. By the time he reached the door, his hands were numb, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. He pushed the door open. It creaked painfully, the hinges almost frozen. Inside, the air was slightly warmer, though still cold enough to make his teeth chatter. A small fire smoldered in the stone hearth, weak but alive. He blinked through the dim light and froze. A woman sat near the fire, wrapped in a fur blanket, her long dark hair damp and tangled. Her eyes, wide and watchful, turned toward him instantly. She didn't speak, but her posture was tense like a cornered wolf. "I mean no harm," Ethan said quickly, raising his hands. His voice was rough from the cold. "I just need shelter. The storm—" She nodded slowly, gesturing toward the fire. "Close the door," she murmured, her voice soft but strong. "Before the wind kills us both." He obeyed, closing the door and leaning his weight against it until it latched. The sound of the wind dulled, replaced by the crackle of the small flame. He moved closer, hands stretched out to the warmth. The woman watched him quietly. Her clothes were simple, leather and wool, travel-worn and damp. Her eyes were deep, grey like the storm outside, and something about her felt wild, untamed. "Thank you," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "I didn't know anyone was here." "It's not my cabin," she replied, her tone guarded. "I found it the same way you did. The mountains have their secrets." He nodded. "You've been here long?" "Since the storm began," she said. "A day, maybe more. Time doesn't move right when you're trapped." Ethan studied her for a moment. She looked young, maybe in her mid-20s, but her gaze held a kind of ageless weariness. There were faint scratches on her cheek, and her hands, slender but strong, trembled slightly as she held them close to the fire. He unwrapped his pack and took out a small loaf of bread and some dried meat. "You should eat," he offered. "You look half frozen." She hesitated, eyeing him carefully, then accepted a piece. "You travel prepared." "I try to," he said with a faint smile. "Didn't expect company, though." She smiled back briefly. It was small but genuine, the first warmth he'd seen that night besides the fire. Hours passed as the storm raged outside. They took turns feeding the fire, listening to the wind scream against the walls. The woman, she still hadn't told him her name, finally spoke again, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "You shouldn't have come up here," she said. "The mountain doesn't forgive easily." "I had no choice," Ethan said. "I'm searching for a lost trail. My brother disappeared in these ranges last winter. I thought I might find a trace." Her eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "What about you? You seem like you belong here more than I do." A shadow passed across her face. "Maybe I do," she said. "Maybe I was born for the cold." Before he could ask what she meant, the fire flared suddenly, as if a gust of unseen wind had touched it. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, and Ethan felt the hairs rise on his arms. The woman's eyes darkened, her expression changing. "Something's here," she whispered. "What do you mean?" She stood slowly, her movements graceful but tense. "The mountain spirits don't like intruders." Ethan frowned. "Spirits, you mean wolves or—" But then he heard it, a sound like a low growl, distant but growing closer. His hand went to his belt where his hunting knife rested. The door rattled, once, twice. Then silence. The woman turned to him, her face pale but calm. "Don't open it," she warned. "Whatever calls from the storm isn't human." They sat frozen by the fire, listening to the wind twist and wail. After a long, tense moment, the noises faded. The fire flickered and a strange calm returned. Ethan exhaled slowly. "That was something." The woman nodded. "You'll be safe tonight," she said, looking at him in a way that made his chest tighten. "But when the storm ends, your life will no longer be your own." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw the faint shimmer of tears, or maybe light, in them. "There are old laws in this land. When two souls share warmth to survive the mountain's wrath, they become bound by sacred law." Ethan blinked. "Bound? You mean—" "Mates," she said softly. "By the mountain's choosing." He laughed nervously, thinking she must be joking. But her expression didn't change. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand, and suddenly warmth surged through him, spreading like fire under his skin. The air around them shimmered faintly, and for a moment the sound of the storm outside vanished. He could hear only the beating of his own heart, and hers, perfectly in sync. When he looked into her eyes again, something inside him shifted, something ancient and primal awakening. "What's your name?" he whispered. "Lyra," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "And now, by the mountain's law, I am yours." Ethan couldn't find words. He only knew that the cold no longer bit at him, and the fire seemed to burn brighter. Outside, the storm screamed one last time, and then, as if satisfied, it began to fade. But inside that lonely shelter, something far more powerful had begun to stir. Morning came slowly, wrapped in silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world blanketed in a heavy, endless white. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the old cabin walls, catching on drifting flakes of frost. Ethan stirred awake to the crackle of the dying fire. For a moment he couldn't tell where he was. Then memory came flooding back, the storm, the woman, the strange pulse of warmth that had passed between them. Lyra. She sat by the window now, her eyes fixed on the world outside. Her expression was distant, her posture calm, too calm, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. "Morning," Ethan said softly, rising and pulling his coat tighter. "Looks like the storm's done." She nodded without turning. "For now, the mountain is quiet." "But it remembers," Ethan frowned. "You said something last night about a bond, about being mates?" Finally, she turned to face him. There was no fear in her eyes, only sorrow. "You think I was speaking in riddles, but you felt it, didn't you?" He hesitated. "I don't know what I felt. It was," he searched for words, "like something alive. Like fire and heartbeat together." "That was the binding," Lyra said. "The mountain chooses. When two souls share life, warmth and breath through the cold of death, they become one." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process her words. "That can't be real. It's just an old legend." Lyra gave a faint, sad smile. "Legends are the mountain's memories. You can deny them, but you can't undo them." She stood, wrapping her fur cloak around her shoulders. "You should go when the sun rises high enough to show the path. If you stay, you'll never leave this place." Ethan took a step closer. "What about you?" "I can't go," she said simply. "I belong to this mountain." He stared at her. "You're telling me you live here, alone?" Her silence was answer enough. Outside, a single raven called, its cry echoing across the frozen valley. Lyra glanced toward it, her jaw tightening. "They're already watching." "Who?" "The spirits. They'll test you now. The mountain doesn't give without taking." Ethan shook his head. "I don't believe in any of this." I just want to find my brother and get off this cursed slope." At that, Lyra's eyes softened. "Your brother? He disappeared last winter. I tracked him up here near Blackridge Pass." Lyra's breath caught faintly. "Blackridge?" She turned away, her hands trembling. "Ethan, you shouldn't have come." "Why not?" he demanded. She closed her eyes. "Because he's part of the mountain now." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Ethan felt his pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" "You saw him?" Lyra didn't answer at first. Then she said, "He came during another storm, just like you. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. The mountain took him." "Took him?" Ethan's voice broke. "You mean he's dead?" "Not dead," she whispered. "Bound, like us." Ethan staggered back, shaking his head. "No, this is insane." He grabbed his pack. "I'm leaving." "You can't," Lyra said quietly. "Not yet." He ignored her and reached for the door, but as soon as he opened it, a wall of icy wind slammed into him. The sky, which moments before had been pale and calm, darkened again. Snow began to fall, slow at first, then faster. Lyra's voice came behind him, low and filled with warning. "You defy the bond, and the mountain will punish you." "Enough with the riddles," he snapped. "I'm not a pawn in some fairy tale." But before he could take another step, the snow beneath his boots cracked. A deep, resonant rumble echoed through the pass. The ground trembled, and from the mist beyond the trees, a shadow began to form. It was tall, humanoid, but not human. Its body woven from ice and mist, its eyes glowing with a dim, eerie light. Ethan froze. Lyra stepped beside him, her expression grim. "The Guardian!" The creature's voice was a whisper and a roar all at once. "He denies the bond. He defies the sacred law." Ethan gripped his knife instinctively. "What does it want?" "You," Lyra said. "It will not stop until you accept what the mountain has decreed." The Guardian stepped closer, frost forming where its feet touched the earth. Ethan's breath hitched. Every instinct screamed to run, but something in Lyra's face stopped him. "What happens if I accept?" he asked quietly. Lyra's eyes glistened. "Then your heart becomes mine, and mine yours. You'll never leave the mountain, but neither will I be alone." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan looked at the Guardian, then back at her. "You knew this would happen when you let me stay last night." "I didn't choose it," she said. "The mountain did. But I won't let it destroy you." Before he could answer, the Guardian lunged forward. Lyra threw herself in front of him, a burst of white energy flaring from her palms. The creature recoiled with a screech, shards of ice flying through the air. Ethan caught her as she fell back, weak from the effort. "Lyra!" She looked up at him, her breath shallow. "It's too strong. You must choose." Ethan looked into her eyes filled with pain, courage, and something else. Love. Real, raw love, and in that instant the choice became clear. He took her hands in his, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then I choose you." A blinding light burst around them, gold and silver flickering like fire, and snow entwined. The wind howled once more, then fell silent. The Guardian froze mid-step, its icy form cracking and collapsing into glittering dust. When the light faded, Ethan and Lyra stood alone. The mountain was still again. Lyra looked at him, tears in her eyes, not from sorrow but peace. "It's done," she whispered. "The bond is complete." Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What happens now?" She smiled softly. "We live together. The mountain will no longer fight us." He pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his. For the first time since his brother vanished, he felt something real, belonging. As they stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds. The world below stretched in glittering silence, a kingdom of white and gold. The cabin, once a prison, now felt like home. Ethan turned to her. "Maybe fate isn't something to run from after all." Lyra's smile deepened. "Fate doesn't chase us, Ethan. It waits until we're ready to meet it." Together, they walked down the slope hand in hand, their footprints the only mark on the untouched snow. and though the wind whispered around them, it carried no threat, only a song of promise, of love sealed beneath the mountain's watchful gaze. The mountain had chosen, and this time it had chosen well.